And it's on.
We're back, baby.
Back in action. Nostr News.
We've been away, but still doing it. So
yeah. Well, I'm trying to think of. I mean, we've had a very kind of hit or miss late half of the year. So I'm trying to think of the last time we got together, because it was it before Nostrasia or just after?
It was before Nostrasia.
It was before. So yeah, I need that update. I haven't heard anything about that yet.
Oh man, I can't believe it. Yeah, I got to show you right now. Still repping this as the shirt my dad made for Nostrasia. So I knew that would probably come up today.
Awesome. I mean, is that a good place to start, or what else?
Well, let's start. I mean, we have so much to catch up on. Yeah. I think we really haven't chatted since the summer almost. Or
I mean, we chat sometimes.
Oh, of course. But with all of our homies,
our extended family,
exactly. So yeah, let's start with Nostrasia. So that was in early November
1st, right?
Mm-hmm. And we went over on Halloween. Yes, that was super cool. We arrived on October 31st. And we were staying, the conference was in Shibuya. And so, they were supposed to kind of dial down the Halloween celebrations there because there had been some kind of stampede in Korea recently. And so I guess they were worried about that.
There's a stampede in Korea.
Something like that. I don't know all the details. But for whatever reason, in Shibuya, there were signs everywhere saying no Halloween celebration. They're trying to control the crowds. Because, Shibuya Crossing is very famous for having tons and tons of people. But anyways, we went anyway. And there was still a ton of people, all kinds of crazy costumes. We wore some masks ourselves. It was a great time. Honestly, I'll start by saying Japan is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
Everything about Japan, that's got to be the greatest country on earth, at least to visit. It is so cool.
Yeah.
In every which way. So anyway, Japan was amazing. I'm a big green tea addict. And so I'm happy to wax poetic about all the kinds of tea, as much as you guys want senchas and gyokuros and matchas. And I came back with way too much tea.
But I thought you were a no caffeine person.
No caffeine in the afternoon. And that's just otherwise I'll be up all night, and I'm already naturally nocturnal. So
got it.
Anyway, so that was incredible. And just, being in Japan, for a little over a week and a half was really nice. The conference itself, though, was excellent as well. It's already been over a month. Wow. First of all, it was cool to see, a lot of the same faces from Nostrasia, people that had maybe started projects that were still working on them. So, of course, you had people like Pablo, Jack was obviously there, and he continues to do so much to sponsor that whole ecosystem. Ben Ark from Ellen Bits, the Albee guys, Bob, our mutual friend who's now working on Prisms. Jeff was there. Just an incredible group of folks. A lot of the same folks from Nostrasia.
Yeah.
And then you obviously had a lot of new folks that were coming in. One of the interesting things was there was a whole Japanese sub community. I had no idea they even were there. And so some of these guys apparently have their own relays. And their own Japanese only community. There was one guy that gave a talk purely in Japanese and English slides about search. And he was using Elastic and all this stuff and was trying to build his own search engine, but it was all in Japanese. And so that was pretty trippy.
And is that both on the user side and the developer side?
Well, good question. I think he was primarily focused. Actually, I don't know. My impression was getting developers to use his software, but the way he was talking about, I guess users could use it as well. But that was cool just to see that there was a whole community I didn't even know existed in Nostr.
Right.
And it's also interesting, by the way, I think we mentioned this before, but Japan after the US was always Twitter's largest country.
Right.
And so for whatever reason, I guess the way the Japanese language works, the 140 characters, that was a good amount of space for people to share things in Japan.
It's more like long form blogging, right?
Yeah, I guess so. Anyway, so I had no idea, but apparently it's popular in Japan. That was cool. And in addition to that, you started to see, Fountain, Oscar was there. The Wavelate guys were there. There's a really cool value for value panel with Oscar, the Wavelate guys, Open Mike, who's the guy in Minneapolis that's doing a bunch of Bitcoin value for value shows right now, which is really cool. In fact, I think they've got that girl Ainsley, who I don't know if she's already broken $10,000 in sats, but that was kind of their goal. Is let's get one artist who was not into Bitcoin. I think her dad was, and help them make enough money they could sustain themselves.
And it's non-Bitcoin content. It's just other.
Yeah.
Other. What's the style of content that she's
country music
making? Okay.
I actually haven't even listened to it yet, but she's in Nashville. I want to say she's Gen Z or something, so pretty young. And it's just country music, but people can zap her. So
nice.
Anyway, so that was all really cool to see people kind of thinking on some of those next things. I think the stuff that I, I'm still very excited to see people developing marketplaces. You know, Ben was talking a lot about Nostr markets from Ellen Bits. If I had to pick one, obviously Million was there with Primal and they made some announcements. They've released a lot lately.
Yeah.
If I had to say one talk that really caught my attention though, without a doubt, it was Bob's talk on using Nostr as Bitcoin's layer 3. Now, for me in my fund, though, I've said this in a kind of similar way. The way I've always said is Bitcoin is decentralized network for money or value, Lightning for payments, Nostr for data or messaging. Bob kind of made that very specific for the financial or payment use case. So Bitcoin money, Lightning payments, and then Nostr is the messaging layer to coordinate payments. If you haven't already watched his talk, highly recommend it. To me, this was like at least one of the must-see talks from the conference. And the way he said it was just so clear. Where in the fiat system, obviously, we all know the problems with our dollar system. We all know the problems with the banking system. But his point was like, we actually have like pretty decent messaging systems to be able to coordinate between various banks. And that would be stuff like the credit card networks like Visa or MasterCard and Plaid, which can basically help, find and solve the identity and coordination problem of how does one bank send to another bank, or, how do you coordinate payments between lots of entities. And his point was that in the Bitcoin and Lightning world, we've obviously solved the money problem, or we think so. We have a sound money. We think we've solved the payments problem with Lightning, but we have not solved that messaging problem. And the way he said it was very simple in that the beauty of the internet is not one-to-one communication. It does that, and that's great, but we already kind of, more or less had that. We have telephone before that, even the telegram if you want. But what the internet does is anyone to anyone, or one to many, or many to many all the time. And so his point was with a Bitcoin Lightning payment, let's say you wanted to send a payment to even 3 people right now. Like maybe you can do that, but it's still pretty challenging, particularly if maybe you're sending an Albi user, a Strike user, a Cash App user. They all have different standards for receiving those payments. And so what he wanted to demonstrate in his kind of big, eureka moment was if we can use Nostr as the messaging layer for Bitcoin and Lightning, then that gives everyone a common identity standard and a common protocol for connecting all these different existing Lightning apps. High level, Bob's talk, Nostr is the messaging layer for Bitcoin Lightning. Bitcoin is money, Lightning is payments. And then sort of like Visa and MasterCard, you still have this problem where if I want to send to 3 different wallets, Lightning wallets, say Albi, Cash App, and Strike, they all have different standards. And so Nostr provides common standard for figuring out how to send those payments and a common identity system.
The identity of who you're sending to.
Exactly. And so what you can then do, and this is what Nostr Wallet Connect allows. So basically you need 2 things for this to work. You need Nostr Wallet Connect and something like Lightning Address. Today, just Lightning Address is fine. Maybe in the future, it'll be a completely Nostr version of that. But basically the ability for you to say, on my behalf, I authorize a payment to be sent, to whatever, another user's wallet info using Nostr Wallet Connect. And the only thing I need to know is their Nostr pub key to send that payment. And so that's really interesting because now all of a sudden, in theory, you can start doing, instead of just 3 payments at a time or 1-to-1 or 1-to-3, you could do 1-to-50 and start doing lots of payments at once. And that was kind of the big thing he was showing with his Prisms and split payments. And that to me was like a really powerful idea of like, okay, now you're starting to see like a true internet of money emerge.
And so how does that, is it similar to the way you can do like a split payment on, I don't know, like I think Fountain has this, right? Where you can, we could publish this podcast on Fountain and then people could send us sats and we could say 50% to you, 50% to me or something.
Right. And that's what Bob is calling, I think, his Prism product.
Okay. And so Fountain does this kind of on their, I guess it's like a closed source iOS app, right?
Right. And I think that's the way Kian does it as well in StackerNews.
Okay, right. Yeah, they have like payment routing kind of.
Yeah.
And then this is like a protocol. The Bob's project is more like a protocol way to incorporate those types of product features.
Exactly, but doing it only with, I think the only thing you need is to receive the payment, you need a Lightning address. To send it, you need Nostr Wallet Connect. So you need to be able to, I guess, and I need to verify this, but you need to be able to specify, I guess, the different Nostr pub keys, and each of those need to be hooked up to a Lightning address.
I see. And then I'm not deep enough on Lightning here, but is this like a non-custodial thing, or Bob is taking custody of the funds to do this?
So non-custodial, although today if you have Lightning address, you're probably using a custodial provider to receive that, although that could change
in the future.
But it's independent of Bob.
Prism, Bob's thing, right?
Exactly. And so that's actually the big value prop that he's pushing for here is that messaging companies like Plaid never touch your money. And the same thing is happening here. When one of his big selling points was if you want to go and get a big company like a Google or whoever to integrate Lightning, it's a huge pain in the ass. One, it's technically difficult. Two, they have to figure out, am I a money transmitter? Am I not? What do I do with this Bitcoin once I have it? Do I need to have any kind of special accounting? It's just a huge pain in the ass. And like, if it's not your core business, you're just not going to do it because why would you? And so with Nostr Wallet Connect and using, this new protocol for just messaging, you can basically say, hey, authorize us to send a payment from, you bring your own Lightning wallet. So you can bring Alby, great. Give us your InPub, cool. Give us the InPub you want to send to, great. If you want to receive, give us your Lightning address. And you can now authorize payments to be sent on your behalf. And the company that's doing the coordination never touches the money. They just say, hey, your wallet, Alby, send a payment to this address right here, and we never touch it. And so that's a lot easier in theory for a Google or some of these other tech companies to integrate because they don't actually become money transmitters or touch your money.
And when you send it to that single NPub, it hits that, and then through the Prism system, it distributes that to maybe 5 or 10 or hundreds
yes,
of...
and I'm not exactly sure how that works, but in theory, I think and maybe I guess that's what Bob and his company are solving, but all they need is the NPubs of the people they're sending it to, and those, in order to receive the payment, I think that needs to be hooked up with a Lightning address as well.
And you mentioned Bob's company. So is he actually doing this as like a,
from what I can
like
tell,
a startup?
Yeah.
More or less?
I don't know if he's going to go, I mean, it seems like he's going like all in on this. In fact, it'd be good to have him for another chat soon. I think he's still kind of in the exploratory phase, but if you go to Make Prisms, I was just checking it last night. I mean,
MakePrisms.com?
I think so. Yeah.
Because it seems like it's a useful primitive for Nostr, but a lot of Nostr primitives are a little more nips and open source and kind of that. So I wonder what kind of, like, is there a specific application he already has in mind or one that...
Well, the big thing he was launching with, one, you can do these prisms, if you want to be able to do, hey, split payment to whatever these people. But the big thing he had in mind was similar to Twitter's pooled payments product or whatever today. Like if you do, what is it called? The Twitter Blue, if you pay the $10 a month or $8 a month or whatever, that's a pool of money that they then pay out to the content creators. He was trying to do the same thing with Nostr. And I actually don't know how successful this has been since the conference, but the idea was you basically pay, I think it was like 3,000 sats to go into a pool. And that pool then got paid out to the top 10 posts for various trending hashtags like art, nature, and other stuff like that.
But then Bob or his company
is the coordinator of all that.
Coordinating
but they never touch the money. That's the difference.
But they're collecting, so they're collecting it on the monthly subscription.
They're setting up the Prism that says conditionally this money will get sent. Like I think it's on a rolling basis of the last 3 days. The money that you put in there goes into a pool that gets paid out, but they never actually pool the money themselves. So I'm not sure exactly how that works, but in the Twitter case, they take, or any of these other, platform cases, they take the money themselves, take custody, and then pay it out. In this case, I think he's conditionally setting the payment so it gets paid out to the right people, to the right 10 people in the Prism, but he never touches the money.
I see. And so those people have to have wallet payments initiated.
Those people need to have Lightning addresses hooked up.
Lightning address hooked up
to their input.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
So anyways, and look, I mean, obviously Bob can explain this better than I can.
I'll have to watch the video if you already.
But the general takeaway is Nostr is great for solving identity and messaging for Bitcoin Lightning payments.
Yep.
That was my kind of like, oh yeah, that's a really nice, clear explanation.
Yep, makes sense.
Yeah.
And so that was one of the highlights of Nostrasia for you?
Definitely, yeah. Just the way that hit me very clearly. I would say that was probably one of the biggest highlights. There was another one, actually, I was going to say you're going to be gone tomorrow, but this guy, Stuart, Bowman, I'm not sure how you say his last name. I was really impressed with his talk as well. He's the developer of Satellite.Earth. Anyways, he's not too far away from here. So we're going to chat, I think maybe tomorrow in the next couple
What
days.
is Satellite.Earth?
Satellite.Earth is another Nostr client, and it's more of like a Reddit or Discord type of client.
Oh, cool.
But he's also doing a lot of interesting things. I don't know what I can share yet, but he has a lot of interesting ideas around how to distribute and store content in a decentralized way.
So meaning like the media server for a video or something.
How to do Nostr.build decentralized.
Okay. Yeah. And people touched on like maybe a BitTorrent thing. Is that kind of...
That's kind of the direction he's thinking, I think. And I'll see where his latest thinking. I am also extremely curious about this idea of incentivized torrents. I know some people have criticized it. I think Fiat, Jaf, and Pablo are less bullish on using torrents. I actually don't know all their arguments. I'd have to go and learn more. But this guy, I was extremely impressed with his talk. He seems very sharp. Satellite.earth is a really nice client too.
And he's both a kind of subreddit like community forum aggregation software. So I guess he's like taking notes and presenting them in that community style.
Yeah.
And then he's also
somewhat similar to StackerNews a little bit.
But both that and a media server.
Yes, and
the
today
product is kind of both in one.
Yeah, and I think he started off as more of the Reddit or even like kind of Discord, I guess, client, and then he recently, I think, in the last couple of weeks, launched something like Nostr build natively, which is just him centralized. But the idea is he's thinking about how to do it decentralized.
Right.
So I'm very curious to learn more. I personally think the incentivized torrent thing sounds fascinating, and it makes sense to me, like getting paid to seed. I'd have to chat more with Pablo and understand. I'm sure there's real reasons he's skeptical of that. But someone needs to figure out some way. And I know Fiat Jaff is like a huge hater in IPFS, beyond just the shitcoinery involved with Filecoin. So yeah, hopefully next time we chat, I'll have more to report there. But I think those are the two talks that really caught my attention.
Right. What has Pablo been up to lately? I haven't caught up with him in a little bit.
I haven't caught up with him since the conference, and even at the conference, that man, of course, was like on every stage, and like he also just like had a kid, so he seems like he's got his hands full.
Yeah.
I think he's launched InSec Bunker. I'm seeing a lot of chatter about that. I don't know if people are, if it's like just in like beta and a few people are using it, but I've heard some positive things about people using InSec Bunker, and InSec Bunker is an easy way to like secure your keys and say, I think permission signing for various use cases. I think like one like very clear example is, let's say, kind of like the what was that company, Buffer, kind of like social media management.
Right,
like, okay, like I want someone to be able to manage whatever various accounts, and they can sign off on certain things from these accounts, but not everything.
Right.
And so I think InSec Bunker was like an attempt to give you some of that granular permission signing stuff.
Right.
But I don't know too much since then. We both need to do a chat with them.
Catch up with Pablo out there.
Yeah. So the thing I am most excited about, which I want to dive into, is StackerNews.
Oh yeah.
But before we do, I think we have a lot to talk about on StackerNews. How the hell have you been, man? I haven't seen you. I mean, I've seen you at some other, sort of tangentially related events. But. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I'm good. I think, I have been, kind of all around town, really with, the Founders You Should Know program has taken up a lot of my time as it's sort of become a vortex for all things tech in San Francisco. So I've kind of been pretty kind of involved in that, and that has taken up a lot. But I have, still, super interested in these topics, and I want to sort of figure out where do these touch that and where does that touch. They seem like they're different communities, like the kinds of people who are most attracted to one or the other don't necessarily
for now
have as much. For now. And so, I mean, I hope that we can bridge that at some point, because I'd love to get, more people involved in actually both ecosystems. I think there's a lot of good to be done to get just more people building great things and help more people get started and assemble teams and all of that. So
I've gone to a couple of these Founders You Should Know showcases, which is really cool. A lot of AI, a lot of traditional sort of tech, early stage stuff. Incredible showcases. What has been most interesting or surprising to you about, I don't know, the startups you've seen there, the community you've built, AI?
Yeah, I mean, I think the most surprising thing is how fast people can go from nothing to a very substantial business, given all of these new AI ingredients that are kind of floating around there. And that can be everything from like, there's insatiable demand for GPUs, so people can build businesses, kind of assembling clusters and making those available. And then there's all kinds of applications that can be built already, and they often tend to be a little bit more kind of enterprise use case. Like you identify a customer, they have a problem, you solve a problem. But people are willing to pay because these problems like are meaningfully different than anything the customer's ever seen before. And so, there's plenty of examples, like businesses launched this year that are already on, multi-million-dollar run rates.
It's crazy. And are these just like GPU businesses, you mean, or?
No, even like application, like a SaaS application business in AI.
Wow.
Just that the primitives are so powerful and different than the customer's ever seen that people there's definitely people who just like pilot something and try it out and see, oh, like we'll try anything, right? Then there's people actually getting like lots of real value out of these things. So things that you might think, oh, there shouldn't be a market for that. Like I don't know if we talked about Cursor, or did you see Cursor? They're building like an IDE with very tight, sort of, if you were to imagine an IDE built with,
oh yeah, I do remember this. Yeah,
with like a GPT coding tool integrated deeply into that experience. And people say, oh, well, you could have VS Code with a plugin. But if you actually go deep, you actually find that there's all kinds of opportunity to build something really that takes all those primitives and uses them in a tighter way. And there's people building those kinds of things, or application specific. How do you do image transformation or image generation for for a specific use case, like maybe in architecture or planning, or in e-commerce and Shopify stores or something like that. There's so many of these applications. These the internet is just such a massive place. Like,
I love that.
It's hard to keep remembering that if you're not actively pushing yourself to realize how big the internet is, because you're kind of like, well, I don't know, I go open up my computer, open up my phone, open up a web browser, open up Nostr, Twitter, whatever. Like that's my view of like the world, but that's a tiny sliver of the whole world is connected on this
humanity.
thing.
Yeah.
And so much commerce happens there. And it's almost like if it's not on there, it almost, increasingly has less relevance in the world in a way. So I guess I'm most struck by the pace of real business building that has been going on. And then I think on the flip side of that, there's all these real business being built, but we also don't really know like what the final state of any of this is.
Right.
And that's I think a reason to be optimistic. It's not a pessimistic view, but it's like there's so much change that there's not a single AI company I can point to that's like, this is the one that we're going to have 10, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
It's like the chessboard is getting thrown up and shuffled, and it's exciting because it's just like open for tons of experimentation, tons of people to innovate and try different things. And many of them are really, really working really, really fast.
What is not to distract us too much, but what is your best guess 10, 20 years out? Do you think it's going to be, for example, like if I had to make a good guess, which companies are going to really thrive from this? Well, at the end of the day, Apple and sort of their monopoly around rich people having iPhones probably not going anywhere, and you could probably get a lot better with running local models. So I'd probably bet Apple's here.
Yeah.
Google probably, although they fumbled a lot, like just that much talent, that much data. Like, are you seeing all these startups? Are you increasingly in the camp of 10, 20 years? One of these, or a couple of these startups could be massive, or do you think the Apples and Googles are just going to take it away?
I think it's not really an either or, it's a both.
Both?
Yeah, like I think you're right about Apple, and I would double down and say, Google largely owns the search experience. And so if you're just typing something into a box, I think Google owns it.
Yeah.
Like if it's just a different smart logic behind that box, but it's ultimately a box, Google owns that. Now, like is plenty of innovation, lots of room for people to try things, but I think it's hard to like make a box that's so much smarter that everybody switches their box.
Yeah.
Same with the devices. Devices are so hard to manufacture, and the supply chain and all of the chips and manufacturing and retail distribution, online and brand. Like you're not going to beat Apple at that thing they're good at. Now, there's transitions that could cause either of those companies to stumble, but I think they're also like very aware of this, and they're aware in a way where they can actually respond. Like when social networking happened, I don't know if you paid a lot of attention to these.
Medium.
But when social networking was taking off, initially Google was very skeptical and like, these things are fads, they come and go, it doesn't really matter. And then once they got serious about it, it was kind of too late because they didn't really have any types of assets to bring to it. So it's just like, I don't know, just try to jam everybody through Google Plus.
Google Plus, I remember that.
It's like obviously, not going to work. Because you actually, with social, you actually need to start with like densely connected people who actually know each other in real life. It turns out to be a good part of the formula. And I think it's hard to recreate that just because you have the technology. But with like, this LM stuff, transformers, like anybody who has a lot of distribution, like Apple, Google, Facebook, can actually improve those products in a meaningful way. And they're mostly going to capture most of the value of that. And they also have they have proprietary endpoints and distribution points. So Apple has the phone that people look at. Google has proprietary data in YouTube. It's probably the most important data set
that YouTube
in the world.
data is super valuable.
And they can train on it. Apple, Google, Facebook, they all own these endpoints, distribution, these experiences. So I think you can make like the phone better. You can make the search box better. You can make like messaging better with LLMs. And I think all of that is going to accrue to those companies, majority of that. But I think there's all kinds of new experiences that have not been built yet. Like one of the ones I wrote about, I think last week or two, is if I just want to conjure up an app from scratch.
I love that.
I should be able to do that. And LLMs kind of get there, and you can squint. They basically totally fail today, but you can squint and see how it would work.
Yeah.
And it's not like crazy science fiction. It's like a bunch of hard engineering work to get that to actually work.
Yeah.
But the ingredients are there. And Google's not particularly good at that. Facebook, Apple, nobody really owns that idea. They're not just extending into their existing dominance to win that. It's de novo. So
I love it.
Can the big ones do it? If they really cared and knew exactly what to build, they could do it. But are they advantaged relative to a startup? Probably not. I think startups will get started to try to build those kinds of things, and many of them won't work. And then, one of them will break out, and it could be as large as a Google, Facebook, Apple.
So let's talk about this. I love that piece of yours.
Yeah, thank you.
The TLDR is basically in the future, democratized software development. I love this word you use, conjure, because it really does. It feels like you're just uttering natural language magic to create whatever software experience that you want. So maybe you could expound a little bit more on what you're thinking.
Yeah. So I sort of have been obsessed with this idea of how can more people create more software? And kind of in the piece I talk about, hey, there's 8 billion people in the world. Everybody actually needs their own custom software.
Yeah.
But most people, there's only 27 million software developers in the world.
Wow, I don't know, it's that low. Yeah.
Up, down a little bit, plus or minus 10, 20%. But that rounds to basically zero. Almost no human knows how to create software. It's like a very limited specialized skill. But every human has software needs. And most people we've kind of programmed ourselves to say, it's good enough, I'll just use whatever I'm given. Instead of saying, actually, what I really want is I want the app that Max has, but I want it to be like a little bit different. I want like the UI to be oriented for somebody who's left-handed, or I want, I read like a right to left language, or I prefer psychedelic colors instead of the black and white kind of gray tone thing. So I think everybody has these needs, but everybody's conditioned to not express those needs, not even imagine or dream them. We've sort of crushed creativity, and we've told everybody, just take, Google Docs as is, and you can't have tweaks, and you can't have all the special features you might want that might help you use Google Docs more effectively. You just get, the one thing that we built for 1 billion people. So I think in the future, I could be using a Google Docs like experience and be like, actually, I wish this just had an image generator in, or I wish it kind of, automatically calculated anytime I do a number, it kind of knows what I'm talking about and, calculates it, or it sees what I'm typing and it comes in with new suggestions. And there's those are like generative integrated cases, but I should also just be able to tell the software, hey, I just want to do something else. And in a sense, it's kind of like creating micro apps. Mm-hmm. Like I can just say like maybe the app already exists. Maybe the feature exists as a sub feature of another app somewhere, but then I have to know the app exists and then download the app and then know how to navigate the feature, maybe set up a blah, blah, blah. It's such a hassle versus if I can just conjure it up and say, hey, I need a thing that does this. like right now, what I would do is I'd say, hey, we had some recording problems earlier. If I could just be like, you know what, give me an app where I can just dump a few video files in and it'll figure out the right thing to do, and it kind of froze the screen at a few times. Just fix that. That's an app I actually want right now because of this experience. It's not something that somebody at Adobe is going to build.
Yeah.
But you can squint and see how that's possible now.
Yeah. One thing that I loved in your piece is you talked about the first example of this being game design.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought this was very interesting. I'm actually not a huge gamer myself. But, and I think something else you've talked about in the past is kind of the blurring of software and media perhaps a bit. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to me because, yes, you can create apps to do whatever you want. But increasingly, what you're also going to do is just create whatever kind of media and then experiences you want. So maybe you're like, hey, we've been conditioned to watch this random ass movie at the movie theater, but maybe you want a movie exactly based on your interest.
Yeah.
And then you can squint and take it a few steps further and you're like, well, maybe then you want to put yourself as first person in your own game that you created.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, maybe that's what's happening right
Yeah.
now. And it's already happened in some other cycle before. We're all just dreaming that we're first persons in whatever game that we wanted to dream up.
Right.
And maybe we're about to rebuild that again in whatever dimension this is.
Yeah, in the simulation.
In the
We're
simulation.
gonna create new simulations, right?
All the way up and all the way down forever.
I mean, that's the whole reason that the simulation hypothesis kind of makes sense, right? It's like,
makes tons of sense.
Because it's like actually literally what we do is we create games and simulate things.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what do
Build
humans
worlds.
do when we get bored? We make new games.
Yeah.
And if you really get bored, what would you most want to do? Forget that you were in a game.
Right.
So it makes tons of sense.
So I think to get something like a AAA title, quality gameplay, I mean, just even the gameplay and the balance and how it feels and how challenging it is and how it graduates up, that's such a challenge. So I say like that can be done someday, but not today. Like
Right.
let's back it off to something reasonable. And I think the very reasonable starting point I propose at least is like crossword puzzles. Like let me make a custom crossword puzzle that's my own app where I just say, hey, generate me a crossword puzzle about Mammoth Lakes, right? We hang out in Mammoth Lakes a lot. So we know things about town that are like, specific words, maybe the name of the coffee shop or the bagel shop or something, where anybody else in Mammoth Lakes would be like, oh, I get it. You see me. That's my thing. But everybody else in the world's like, doesn't make sense. I don't need it, right? And then I can package it maybe as like a PWA, kind of, and send it. I know the, dozens of people, 50, 100 people who would think that's fun to play.
Yeah.
And I bet they would see that and be like, oh, this is cool. And if there's a button that's like make my own or remix, right? Then they can take it in their own direction. Maybe you want to do one about San Francisco. Maybe you want to do one about, your neighborhood or something. And all the people who would want to use it. But it's not like you download an app and you just do the content. Maybe you actually extend it in a direction. You're like, actually, I want to do crossword puzzle, but I want to do like a leaderboard. And I'm going to invite the people who are allowed to use the leaderboard. And you have to log in with a thing, or I give you a code or whatever. But you can just like conjure that up again. Like just decide you want it. And I think the thing about games is they're like build a AAA title is super expensive. Today. To build a crossword puzzle is fairly cheap, but to build like a very customized crossword puzzle is still crazy expensive. So I think if you could like get the personalization of just like a very simple app, but it's hyper personalized, I think everybody would be like, I've never seen anything like that.
Totally.
Max, I didn't know you were a developer. You just made me a crossword puzzle. That's amazing, right? And so I think if you can empower people with those kinds of tools, and we're raw, it's nowhere near like it's probably close enough to start to be able to do these, but I think you need like these early baby steps to get there. But I think what's going to happen is we're going to see 3 to 5 orders of magnitude more software built, and someday people are going to just learn like, oh, you just have whatever you want. If you don't like the way this software is, you tell us to do something else and it'll do it.
Totally. I love it. And by the way, so that's got me thinking of a couple of things. One, your idea of extending and remixing is beautiful because then you can imagine that everyone is a collaborator, right? And as we were talking about earlier, maybe you put out some software that's awesome. Maybe someone takes that, remixes it, and maybe you have split payments in the future that go through everything. And maybe there's a Nostr Wallet Connect and Lightning address that's helping to coordinate a currency of the internet that flows to everyone. And by the way, to your earlier point, I wanted to make this point earlier. You talk about how big software markets are, just how big the internet is, how much commerce is, which by the way makes me just so bullish on Bitcoin because if it's the currency of the internet, which I think it is, and we haven't even gotten started and it hasn't even begun to monetize the internet. Oh, by the way, we're about to increase the amount of stuff that gets distributed on the internet by, as you say, 3 to 5 orders of magnitude. It's probably more than that. Seems like we're pretty early. So anyway, so all that's exciting. I'm also very excited because I think in the best case of this world where we're headed, it's very much, it's the long tail thesis, the Kevin Kelly 1,000 Truth Fans thing, but for everything, for software, for music. Oh, there it is. The man himself. One day we got to get this guy on the show.
He showed up. Yeah. Can we get him? Let's get a picture here.
There he is. The GOAT. But it's so exciting. And so one thing that I personally want, so yes, the software stuff is awesome and that's going to be amazing. One thing that I've wanted, and I expect to have a good version of this year, certainly next year, like in 2024, 2025 at the absolute latest. In fact, there's Rocky on Nostr. You may have seen, he was Bitcoin design lead at Cash App. He also was working on one of the music apps on there. The name is slipping me right now, but he's got a new
Stemster?
one. Stemster, that's it. But he's got a new one out there called Riff, and I just saw he has like a working, very early but working MVP, where you can basically say, I want X kind of music or song. And so I was posting about something. He's like, hey, I want like a J Dilla style beat, and I want lyrics about stacking sats on there. And it worked.
Oh, wow.
And he's got just a bunch of open source models running on there.
And he's doing music generation.
Just music generation. Okay. Yeah. And so what I want is a version of what he's already got. And this is why I feel confident we'll get it this year, because it's like pretty damn good already. It needs some refining, of course, and the model's
this year,
a little bit better.
Like 2 weeks.
Sorry, in 2024. and I'm already thinking we're in the next year. So in 2024, but in some ways, yeah, I mean, like I said, I could use what he's got today and it's not that far off. And I want to basically be able to say, for me, you know, even more than software, what I want is the ability to say, hey, I really want to get back into making music again this year. And I guess I do want software as well. First, though, is I want you to generate for me AI assistant, 25 beats. Here are the 20 beats that I like, the artists I like. Here are some of the themes I'm considering.
Right.
Oh, okay, here are the 10 that I kind of like. Can you tweak those a little bit? Kind of like you do with, ChatGPT today to kind of tweak answers. Then I want to say, cool, now I want you to create me custom software where you can play it, I can record it. Yeah. Awesome. I want you then to do custom software to do the mixing. Let me hear a couple mixes, choose it, do the mastering. Let me choose a couple masters, done. Now create custom software to do all of the distribution for me. I want it distributed on Nostr, Spotify, blah, 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 whatever. Right. And I mean, that future seems pretty close. Totally. At least the first one with the music, 2024, everything probably 2025.
Right. Well, and when you talk about like distribution everywhere, I think that's actually a great use case. That's one that I want to talk about because it's both like one of the first apps I would want to use this LLM thing for, but also like kind of a request for services in a sense. Because I find myself increasingly kind of split on all of the places where I connect with people. Right. So, historically you could have said, oh, I'm mostly just on Twitter for that. But now I'm like doing a lot on Nostr and doing a lot on StackerNews. Yeah. And I've also been kind of playing around with threads, and like, it's not necessarily like ideologically the kind of thing that's super attractive, but there's enough people who are there that I don't want to miss the ability to engage with them.
Are there people, so just quick side question, are there people there that you can't engage with on Twitter though?
Well, there are people. It's not always about like, are the people there, but it's like, I think Twitter doesn't show my stuff to all the people I'm connected to.
Got it. Okay.
So I get a more vibrant kind of, I think my stuff is more visible to the people I would want to connect with on Threads.
Interesting.
And it's like, they might follow me on Twitter, but I think Twitter, maybe I talked about Nostr too much and the algorithm.
You've been shadow banned, DK.
But I kind of, feel like that sort of happens where it's like, there's like maybe handfuls of people that I actually regularly engage with on Twitter, but I think on Threads, it's much more raw, but there's a lot of people who will chime in. And so the point is not so much can the person be accessed via that network, and then LinkedIn is another one. And so, which like
good old LinkedIn.
I know I used to hate LinkedIn so much because it just feels so like I feel like I'm in like a corporate-y and
but people are there.
But there's a lot of people there, and a lot of people go there to learn about new things that they might want to spend their time on, which is kind of relevant to some of the Founders You Should Know stuff. So when I have an idea, something I'm excited about, a piece I've written to share, I now am like, okay, open up this thing and open up that, and I've got like kind of like definitely more than half dozen places that I need to go with it if I want to reach all of the people that I'm connected to in different ways. And so I don't think it's a great tier 1 startup product, but I do think it'd be great to have just like a Chrome extension.
Yeah, just post to everything.
To just post to everywhere, and I can flip it on or off or whatever. But I think an important feature of this is it could also post to Nostr.
Yeah, of course.
And even if you haven't yet begun to care about posting Nostr, it could do it just like
on your behalf.
On your behalf. Here, your stuff's out there. It's floating around. Maybe it finds an audience there, and then you get more excited about it.
And by the way, maybe you get zapped there.
Yeah, maybe it gets out there. And then you start to be like, oh, well, what's this thing? But instead of having to like wholesale cut over and be like, I'm abandoning the old world and I'm only living in this new world, you can kind of like more kind of, it's a gentler glide path to this new world.
Has anyone built that yet?
I haven't seen anything like it.
Is it even possible?
Well, I think it would be hard to do as like a server side thing because it'd probably get shut down.
Exactly.
And I know that, well, I don't know how much of the thread stuff is like actually, how they're integrating with Mastodon. And I think Alex Gleason has, been one of the big bridge developers and proponents of that. And I feel like I've seen him say some things that sound a little disappointed in how it works, but I don't think I can accurately represent how it works. But I don't think it's like a first tier priority that Threads wants to enable such things.
Right.
And I think it is a first tier priority that things like Twitter want to disable such things.
Exactly, yeah.
But Twitter does want to enable users to use apps, to use the Twitter app. And so I think a simple solution is a Chrome extension that acts on my behalf. It's just like automating clicks that I would otherwise do. It's not a server-side thing. It's not a service. But it's just a Chrome extension that can, I'm logged into Twitter. I'm logged into Nostr. I'm logged into,
whatever,
LinkedIn, whatever. And it can't really be shut down, right? And it can push all my stuff to all the places I want it to be.
Kind of like a modern buffer, no?
Yeah, I've never used that. My understanding is buffer is kind of around timing posts.
It was around timing posts. And I never use it either, but I thought maybe you could do it across platform, but maybe not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know the specifics. But I waste a lot of time with this stuff. And also like I've been posting on Substack.
It's a pain in the ass. Well, and honestly, and we've talked about this since the very beginning as well, in addition to the one-to-many distribution, for me, I noticed today, like, man, I am so sick of having half a dozen at least messaging apps.
Yeah.
Like, a founder was messaging me on Telegram and I just missed it for 3 days because I don't fucking check out Telegram. And I tell them, can you please message me on Signal? Then I've got guys in Latin America that only use WhatsApp. Then, email for everyone else. SMS. It's just like, good Lord, at what point can I just be like, I want one control panel with all my stuff,
And whenever people have tried, like, do you know text.com, I think I
haven't tried that.
Tried to unify it, but I mean, I think they're always hacky and kludgy. Like,
exactly. Because there's not an open API.
Yeah. And, there's a bunch of interests around, in kind of keeping those closed. So I think messaging should trend to open, but only by user choice. I'd prefer not by like regulatory fiat, just because I think that stuff gets kind of gnarly when you start appealing to people. You're like, well, make that open. But
and again, coming back to the Nostr as a messaging layer, you know, what I really hope it becomes not just a messaging layer for Bitcoin. I mean, that's great, and that's Bob's first use case, but just a messaging layer. Period. Just a common identity standard. Period.
Yeah. I would love that, and I'd love to be able to kind of configure. I mean, the beautiful thing about Nostr is the openness. So if I could just configure, here's all of the stuff I want. Here's whatever. There's the messages I want to receive, the stuff I want to read. But if I could just have it pulled in or pushed in from everywhere that I might have access to or want to, and make that like my hub.
Totally.
That would meaningfully change my relationship with the internet.
Same. It would like save a lot of people a lot of time.
Yeah. And I think it has the opportunity to kind of, it's a little Trojan horse Nostr, like, hey, all this stuff is really easy because Nostr makes it easy, right? So it kind of, in a sense, like, if Nostr's the right architecture and kind of, protocol tool for the job, then it should be obvious to everybody. But we haven't seen enough, I'd say, experimentation with, like, I guess this comes to that other point, but like we have so much kind of, I guess, I don't know if I want to say like so much of the defensive, antibodies, maybe like, in Bitcoin, there's a lot of this kind of like antibody toxicity, which helps in certain ways, defend against the kind of
the scams,
right?
Yeah.
And I think in Nostr, I think a lot of people have adopted a similar, like, it's Nostr or die, and it's Nostr and everything else must die. And I actually think in the long run, if it's the right protocol and the right tool,
it'll catch on.
It'll just kind of happen. Everything else will fade in relevance or importance by comparison, but I don't think you can necessarily transition it so quickly.
I agree.
Right?
And actually, I tend to agree. I think Jack was talking about this at the conference as well. And I tend to agree with him that like, I think maybe we all got really excited in that first big run up of Nostr last December. In fact, it's been exactly about a year when, Jack tweeted about it and you started getting, the first.
What was the price of Nostr at that point?
The price? I believe it was 69 Satoshis. Yeah. 469 to 420 sats is what I recall. Yeah, there is apparently some Nostr token somewhere. These fuckers, man. And by the way, can I just say, like, okay, so I'll get to that in a minute. But first thing I was going to say, I'll complete this thought with Nostr is we all got really excited. We got a couple 100,000 people coming in and testing it. A lot of them churned out. We're probably, 20,000-ish weekly actives that are posting stuff. Yeah. Let's call it probably 100,000 that are reading, somewhere in that frame. And I think that's fine. Like, I actually would rather we take our time. I don't know what the next big pop is going to be. I think it's still going to be probably a marketplace. There's a lot of ideas. This music app that's coming out. Fountain is integrating it. Wavelake is integrating it. Like, let's see what the next year of experimentation brings. Ellen Bits now is their marketplace software. I don't know what it's going to be, but like, I think it's cool that we go slowly. We don't need to do this overnight. Yep. If it's the best technology, it'll win. Yep. Or, well, I guess that's not always the case, but if it solves a real problem for a lot of people, I think we're in a good position. I think the architecture of Nostr is superior to something like Mastodon. It's certainly superior to a centralized service if you want to have an identity and messaging layer for the internet. I also think that it will probably realistically go up or down with Bitcoin. And if Bitcoin pops, like I think a lot of us believe coming into the halving, that's probably a good thing for Nostr. So my kind of approach on Nostr is just patience, let 1,000 experiments go.
Right.
Let's see what works. And if we solve problems, great. In the meantime, I was just going to make this comment that in my own life, I obviously invest a lot in Nostr, but also in scaling Bitcoin, Lightning Network stuff. My God, it has made it just orders of magnitude more difficult to build bridges between here and like I've been trying to build bridges with the open source AI world. And like, I get why the Bitcoiners are toxic. I have always tried to take a welcoming approach, but it gets so old when like whenever I talk to these open source AI people and stuff, it's like, hey man, like, we can help you with payments like Web3. We're not interested. It's like, me neither. Yeah. Like I am not interested in the crypto scams. Right. So I get why after so long, you just get so frustrated trying to explain to people. And I have a new kind of piece. I'm like rolling around in my head, explaining why Bitcoin is energy backed money and why that's necessary for all the yak movement and all that stuff. Right. But it's just I get why people just get frustrated getting lumped in with crypto. It's really annoying when you're raising or when you're trying to convince other projects to look at what you're doing. It does get old. So I get that. But, at the end of the day, I have firm conviction that Bitcoin is energy-backed money. It doesn't care what any of us think. So that's all good. Yep. And I think similarly with Nostr, like if we solve problems and create the open data layer for the internet, cool. Yep. We'll do just great. Yep. And if not, then we'll adopt something else.
Right. How are the other things kind of like Mastodon you mentioned? I haven't followed it closely, but are Mastodon people getting more excited about these new approaches to? No idea. I mean, I see a couple posts from Alex Gleason as well. I think he's the kind of bridge guy. Yeah. I just am skeptical on the architecture point. Like if there's a sort of king of each server, that to me is like a non-starter. Right.
And
what about Blue Sky? Have you followed anything more happening there? Or?
Not really. I think they may have more users than Nostr right now, but similarly, I think they have similar kind of architectural issues that it's not as
meaning
open.
Similar to the way Mastodon?
Yeah, I don't know enough to speak intelligently there, but my understanding is the only thing that truly you can just plug and play your npub and open up to any app is Nostr right now.
Right. Cool.
So, and again, like if it's not Nostr and something else has a similar architecture, great. But I think the beauty of Nostr, that's going to make it very difficult for anything to kind of surpass Nostr, is its simplicity.
Right.
It's just...
Yeah, I think the simplicity is really important.
Public private key identity and like a JSON blob with 6 or 7 fields.
Right.
That's it.
Yep. Yeah, I think the simplicity is kind of the magic to me anyway. And I also think I think there's a lot of, the music apps, and there's so many different directions it can go, but I think having kind of very I think the water cooler, daily hub water cooler use case is important. People call it the social media. Oh, Nostr is more than just social media, which I totally agree with and get behind that idea. But I also think unless it can uniquely solve some kind of daily media information problems, I think it's hard, discussion information media problems. I think it's hard to get enough daily energy from everybody in order to like create the space for all the rest of the stuff to flourish. So I don't think it's like, oh, like let's just build Twitter clones and then everything wins. Like
I agree.
But it's also not like ignore that case because that's already solved and go do other stuff. I think it's a little bit like the daily, like where do we find information? How do we just discover information is still important. And I don't think you get there just by having Nostr clients that, you know, are great. I love Nostr clients. I use you know Primal every day, and I love what Damas has built. I think those are, you know, just both phenomenal projects. But I think they are like Nostr specific information instead of the internet information that I would like to see.
Totally. And I think that honestly just comes as a result of time and more experiments building. Like the beauty and the way I've always seen Nostr is the super network effects. Like, yeah, maybe we only have whatever it is, 100,000-ish people that are really, you know, into Nostr today. And that's totally fine because whatever the next big thing is, maybe it's, you know, with Ellenbit's marketplace software, maybe it's what OpenBazaar tried to build 10 years ago, which is truly open censorship resistant markets. Like, I wonder where that could be used. Like there's so many different routes this could pop next, but each of them builds on top of the other, right? The 100,000 users that are on Twitter, the Twitter clones can now access the marketplaces, and then new marketplaces can now access the Twitter clones, and whatever each one starts building. And then all of a sudden you start spinning up. Two things I want to talk about that. The first is, if I'm just being super realistic, so I think that the way Nostr is going to pop, there will be new use cases that thrive. It's hard to know what those are. Probably some kind of marketplace. Some of the music stuff is interesting. I think something going after Reddit is probably more interesting than Twitter right now. And I think we'll get to that one in a minute with StackerNews. Yeah. But the other thing that I have to say is, like, if we're just being like super rational about how this is going to play out, if you're bullish on Bitcoin, which I think we are, going into the halving, I think there's also just like a really compelling case that like Zaps are going to be a killer app in the next year. Yeah. And you're going to have people like this Ainsley Costello girl. And she's not a Nostr person or a Bitcoin person, you know, but she, all of a sudden she's making music, you know, she gets paid out a total of like 24 cents or something from Spotify in a year. Right. All of a sudden now she's making a couple $1,000s in sats, which I think is real. Yep. You know, let's just say she, you know, normal country music artist makes, you know, whatever, $1,000 versus a couple of cents. So a few orders of magnitude more. Amazing. Now let's say Bitcoin 10X the next year, which like honestly seems pretty realistic to me for many, many reasons we can talk about. All of a sudden, her friends are sitting around looking like, what the hell? Yep. And she's like, well, I don't know. I got on this Nostr thing. Like, and realistically, that's what Satoshi programmed down with the 4-year halvings. Yep. It's not rocket science. Like I'm a very much left side of the curve caveman, like halving Bitcoin goes up. And I think that's going to bring a lot of people with it. Yeah. Realistically.
Yeah, I think it's right. I mean, in a way, we've talked about this before. Like, can you create a bit of a success story? And I think everything is driven by like a few outlier success stories that kind of pull people in to say, oh, maybe I could do that too. Maybe I could be the next one, right? Totally. And you always see that in media creation, and whether it's, you know, whether it was early Twitter pulling people in to build audiences, or, you know, the kinds of trends that happened on early YouTube, you know, similar, you know, I think in more recent years, we've seen it on like Clubhouse and Substack and other tools, but like the early adopters of such things end up, you know, seeing a lot more audience growth, and oftentimes the audience growth translates to money growth and opportunities, whether it's direct opportunities on the platform or outside.
But to be clear, yes, agree with all of that. But this is even more direct, right? Like, because now we have peer-to-peer zaps, right? And so imagine you're 19 or 20 years old, you make $2,000. Like, that's already cool. Oh my God, at 10X, I have $20,000, and I show my friends like that. Of course, people are going to come check it out.
And you just need like one of them. You just need like a story.
And we already have one. Yeah. And like, I mean, she's already done like whatever, I think the $2,000 threshold. Right. That 10X's, all of a sudden everyone's looking at her like, what the fuck? And all of a sudden people are downloading Primal and Damas. Yeah. And so anyway, so I think that's just kind of inevitable. And I think that's just some of Satoshi's genius. But I think we can't just rely on that. We also have to experiment with other use cases. This kind of transitions a bit to what I want to talk about, which is Reddit and StackerNews. Yeah. So I had a long conversation with Bob in Tokyo around, you know, he was kind of also in the position where Twitter is interesting, but like the network effects on Twitter are very smart. You know, the 100 or so smartest minds in the world are all on Twitter. They're not leaving for Nostr, with the exception of maybe like Jack or one or two others tomorrow, which is fine. But Reddit is a lot more weak right now. Like they don't have nearly as strong of a network effect. And Reddit, you know, I wrote this piece a couple of years ago on how to disrupt Google. We've talked about this around value signal, and the thesis was basically all smart people are basically Googling whatever they want to Google plus Reddit. Reddit should be a huge search engine.
Right.
It's not being monetized correctly or being cared for correctly. Since then, Reddit's gone through all kinds of crap. For a while, they just like shut down various forums where mods are like, wait, what? Like, this is my forum. Turns out it's not my forum. I'm a sharecropper at best.
Right.
They don't get paid. They introduce some crap token, another scam, which is why the Bitcoiners are so whatever, toxic. Then they rug them. And so Reddit is like weaker than it ever has been, in my opinion. Yep. And so, I think, and also the network effects that you need to start a specific sub are very small, right? If you have some hyper specific niche, you don't need the whole world. You can literally have like 5 really smart people spin up a community there. And then all of a sudden, if they're really smart and they're really into it, then that's becomes one of the highest quality information sources on the web.
Yep.
Now, there are some Nostr native clients that are playing that I like. I mentioned satellite.earth. I'm a big fan of Stewart's, and I think it's really cool what he's doing. He's also kind of looking at it from a Discord angle, which is interesting. So like private communities as well. But man, let's talk about StackerNews.
Yeah.
I am so bullish on StackerNews. Oh my God. Anyone that hasn't gone, stacker.news, DK and I have both been big fans and involved with the project for years now. Yeah. Holy shit, StackerNews just went to a different level.
Yeah. What is happening on StackerNews? Like we talk a lot about Nostr here, but StackerNews is not Nostr, and they've dabbled with it and it's probably relevant, but can you help bridge a little bit about like
Well, to be clear, it is very relevant because they already have the ability when you're creating a new post, I believe, I don't know if it's every new post or only certain posts, but you can cross post that onto Nostr relays today. And you can also auth in and log in with Nostr. So it's already very Nostr interoperable. It's not a fully blown Nostr client, if you want to call it that, although at some point it kind of is because you can auth in with Nostr and post to Nostr. Right. So, but anyways, the point is they continue to drive more and more towards Nostr. I think they probably will be the first Nostr client that goes super mainstream is my bet. I guess you could argue Domus and Primal already kind of are, but that goes, let's say, to like 100 million users. Okay, so what is StackerNews? StackerNews is like Reddit, but you get paid in sats. That's it. Very simple concept. But there's a lot going on underneath the hood. Yeah. So over the last 2 years, first of all, Kian is one of the best builders I think either of us have ever seen. The guy has incredible taste. It's rare to have someone who's both like an application developer, so they have good taste and it looks nice and it's easy to use, and also like a big brain protocol developer. Kian's both. Yeah. And so that's a really unique position for him to be in.
And I think he also is savvy about not just diving all the way in.
No, he's skeptical as hell.
He's like very skeptical in like a very healthy way.
Totally.
Where he's not going to like just go chase like the hot new thing. He's going to be like, hot new thing? Okay, let's tinker with it. Let's experiment. We're not going to disrupt the product with it. We're going to experiment.
Totally. And, we tried to convince him to go all in on Nostr like a year ago. And like, to be fair, his response was very much like, seems very interesting. Yep. Has some issues. Yep. He tinkered with the idea of building his own client, which was going to be outer.space. Maybe he'll still launch that someday. Realized that was not the path.
And a relay, right? He built his own relay.
Yeah, Booger relay, which is interesting because it's nostril. So he's got a sense of humor too. Yeah. And decided that wasn't the right time to go all in on that. Instead, decided to kind of work the existing StackerNews community in a backwards compatible way into Nostr, which is what we were just describing. Yep. So anyway, so the core to StackerNews though is, you post content. If it's good content, you get paid for either your creation, if it's original, or curation, if it's something you found on the web. Yep. Now that's interesting for many reasons. One, getting paid obviously is interesting, but 2, it's not just getting paid, it's also a value signal. And this is the thing that I've been most sort of interested in for years now, which is now that we have a brand new primitive in human history, we can attach information and value. That's huge. In fact, that is, in my opinion, what's going to be the basis of the next PageRank. Like PageRank, as you've described many times on the show, creates trust by linking back to Stanford and then kind of like having that trust billow out or like kind of tree out. Well, now you can do similar things, but you can have various identities, which are also in pubs and Nostr on the StackerNews side, that can also create a graph of who's zapped who. And that's extremely interesting to surface what information is valuable. So if you are someone, and by the way, everyone can have their own unique view of the network, which is also fascinating. And that already exists within StackerNews today, where it's not just like one centralized server. It's everyone's individual view of the network is different. So I, have upvoted or zapped a lot of things that you or, Steve or other people have posted. So you guys are like higher in my trust graph weightings. Amazing. That means what my view of the network is going to surface information that you zap or people that you've zapped, like probably second or third degree connections, higher than maybe someone that's more focused on whatever other topic on there. Anyway, so StackerNews has slowly over the last 2 years become, in my opinion, by far the number one source of content about Bitcoin, Nostr, and Lightning information on the web.
Yep.
I use it every day for that.
100% agree.
I have been using it for months. It's just the best. And they were already doing some cool experiments where they were, running like one promoted thing a day. So you've got like, 100,000 plus sats and donations, and there's a jobs board. So they have a little bit of money. They have to take some fees that gets distributed back out to the users. And it's interesting because it's right now it's on like a lottery basis, which I don't like as much, but I think we'll get rid of eventually, where, if you upvote an article early and it gets a lot of other upvotes or, Satoshis, then you get a higher proportion of that today's rewards. Or if you post a piece of content that's very popular and, whatever, you get a higher proportion of the pooled rewards.
Right.
All kinds of extremely interesting experiments he's running about how do you assemble an economy online.
Yep.
Last week, Kian dropped something that I think changed the world. Yeah. I truly believe it killed Reddit. And I'm not saying that, I just say some things that are hyperbolic. I really believe this killed Reddit. It will. Yes. The seed has been planted.
Yes. Yeah.
How about that?
Agreed.
And that is user-owned subs, which he calls territories.
Mm-hmm.
And everything, of course, because it's based in Texas, is very there's cowboy hats and it's a wild west. And,
by the way, do you know how to get a cowboy hat? You don't
of course.
Okay. You don't have to reveal the secret.
Oh damn.
The cowboy hat secret, but I think I figured it out. I'm not going to tell either, but
I definitely know. Okay. Oh yeah, 100%. And anyone, if you get on the site, go to stacker.news, play with it. Don't take our word for it. Don't trust verify. It's just awesome. I can guarantee if you're at all interested in Bitcoin, Lightning, or Nostr, you're going to love it. And maybe even if you're interested in other things, you will soon love it. But make sure.
Go ahead.
Make sure you get that cowboy hat. And if you don't know how to get it, well, my only advice is use the site.
Yeah. And the site, an integral part of using the site is you can post things, you can comment on things,
you can tip things,
and he calls it zaps too, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I think did he invent that term, or that term was invented in Nostr and co-op adopted?
I actually don't remember where it originated,
but it's the same sense. Same sense, but just just kind of in the forum kind of posting, ranking style.
Exactly.
So I think one of the things that's really changed my relationship with StackerNews is getting the PWA.
Oh yeah.
So if you've not played with PWAs, the progressive web apps, basically it's a web app that it feels like an app, but it's really just a website that has some special OS support to do things like, I think it can keep like a local cache of some stuff that you've viewed before. And it's got access to cameras, which StackerNews doesn't use, but Mutiny does, right? You can actually use the camera from the web app.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've got, because you sent me
I sent you some stats,
Mutiny thing back at one of the DZ sessions.
Was that me or maybe
that was you.
Steve? It was me?
That's 100% you. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
You don't remember. You're like spreading the word.
Yeah, I guess.
Well, I think you were like demoing to me somebody, like you were showing it off in front of somebody else.
Could be.
And you sent me a link or a gift or something via Mutiny, and then it was just like in my browser. I didn't have the thing installed, and then I have like access to this like magic internet money.
There we go.
But I think there's so much around StackerNews that changes once you have like a PWA, and it feels like it's an app on your home screen. I have it on my main home screen. I just tap it all the time. I'm reading stuff there. And I think the thing I like about being able to read stuff there is, like you said, the value for value, just to make it very explicit. I think one of the problems that StackerNews is solving, which I don't think is large, it's not very loudly talked about yet, but I think in the future, and a lot of this is due to LLMs, but I think in the future, you would have to be crazy to spend any of your attention on information on the public internet that is not tied to some digital scarcity.
I would say you already would have to be crazy.
Well, I mean, yeah. Kind of, yeah. But like we still do it because that's the way the platforms mostly work, right? Like if you ever open up Twitter,
I'm mostly on StackerNews at this point.
But I mean, like I still, there's a lot of people who publish things on Twitter that I want to read, so I still open Twitter a lot.
Right.
And, probably half the stuff would not make it past the filter if it required digital scarcity to post.
Totally.
But
and I think that's an important point, is that when you post something, you have to pay. It's a very tiny amount, like 10 Satoshis or something. And we'll get to territories in a minute, but like even if call it that's less than a penny, that still kills spam automatically.
Totally. Yeah. And again, that trust rank thing gives you more signal. So not only is it like we've had a relationship zapping each other on other stuff over the years, but now there's actually a new account that was created and it's willing to zap 10 sats or 100 sats or 1,000 sats, but it was just created yesterday. And so like it's not in that web of trust that we're already involved in, right? Totally. And so you be more skeptical and maybe downrank it. And so I just think there's so much signal. And as I think we're going to get, orders of magnitude more content on the public internet, orders of magnitude more spam, it's going to become untenable where like, if the platforms exist, and I think they do and will, I can't imagine consuming any content that's not coupled with some sort of trust. And I think that trust mostly has to get established via like digital scarcity.
I agree 100%. And this has been the reason. And one of the things I'm still most excited about is what is the future of search and discovery going to look like? But like the way I look at it is, in the future of the web, you're not only going to have these 8 billion humans, you're going to have 8 trillion machines and all kinds of like LLM produced crap. Some of it's great, some of it's crap. But, Stacker News already is showing the power of having this value signal in a small community. But now imagine, because it's already Nostr compatible, when the identity reputation that you take on Stacker News transfers to when you're using Primal.
Yep.
And that transfers to when you're using Ellen Bits' marketplace. Yep. And that transfers to when you're using Fountain or Wavelake to listening to your music or listening to your Pi. You can start to see very quickly how those that can, lean into Nostr.
Yeah.
And by the way, I'm sure we'll talk about Artur in a minute as well. One of the other things that came up in Tokyo is the need for, and I think he's the only provider now, maybe Kian should do this as well, but to use basically an API that's like trust as a service.
Oh, that Artur is providing that trust as a service?
I think he is, but that was like a very common, like for example, Oscar at Fountain, which is a podcasting app. He would like to be able to do promotions where it's like, hey, I'll give whatever 1,000 sats if you listen to your first show on Fountain. But I want to make sure you're not a bot.
Yeah, you're not just spinning up accounts and sucking off the thousands of.
Or I want to make sure that you're like at least somewhat engaged with Nostr. So maybe it's a low threshold, but I want to have some threshold that you've like been around for X amount of time, or enough people have vouched for you. And so all of a sudden now he could pay Artur or Kian or someone for that data and just be like, hey, for any in-pub that wants to sign up, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down. I should be careful with that. A thumbs up or thumbs down on whether I should give them 1,000 sats or not.
Yep.
So I think that kind of identity as a service thing is going to be very valuable.
Right. I know Artur had done a lot with that a while back, and more recently, and we can talk about this, but he's been working on Spring mostly. So is the trust network that he's built, I think it's already available as an API, but is that the kind of stuff that Fountain's using? Or
I don't know if they ended up working together or not. I think Snort and Kieran were using Artur's stuff, I think. And I know that was kind of like less of a priority for him since he started working on the browser. So I don't know where all that stands, if he's going to continue to prioritize that or if other people will, but it's a valuable service.
Yep.
And it will continue to become a more valuable service as other new apps basically want to access this graph, the web of trust.
And is the web of trust, I mean, I know Artur's worked a lot on it, and he generally builds great stuff. I think the web of trust in Stacker News is a non-Nostr web of trust, right?
But it could be compatible, right? So my understanding is yes, it started off non-Nostr, but as increasingly either people are offing with Nostr in-pubs, or I don't know if Kian may have converted every Stacker News account to an in-pub. I'm not sure. Okay. But in theory, if he hasn't already done that, he will. Yeah. And in theory, that could just be exported anywhere.
Right. So I've spent enough time with Kian to kind of know why I'm comfortable with it. But I think a lot of people will look at Stacker News and say, this is another centralized service. This guy's going to rug pull us as soon as he gets, some takeoff. So how should somebody who doesn't have as much experience working with Kian, or can you help share why Stacker News is not a rug pull on Nostr, but it's actually a good contributor?
Well, first, before we even get to that question, I wanted to mention why you should even come to Stacker News in the first place. And we've hinted at this, but I want to make it explicit. So last week, Kian launched territories.
Right. Yeah.
And territories are user-owned subs. Now, this is incredible because it takes some of the best parts about Reddit, which is, again, what the beauty of the internet is, the long tail of all kinds of bizarre and random and weird stuff that people are interested in. And it lets people that are interested in those things be admins with two differences. One, in theory, you can own that territory, although that gets to your question. Today, it's still centralized, but in theory, over time, you actually do own that. And two, you get paid for the work that you do, and you can set your own economic policies. So one, I think he has two different pricing options. You can either pay or three, a yearly SaaS, 100,000 sats as a service fee. A monthly fee as a yearly fee, or you can buy it outright for like 3 million sats. Very interesting. You can also, once you become an admin, you can set your own economic policies, which is fascinating. So, in the past, the site was only focused around Bitcoin, Lightning, and Nostr and some tech and meta stuff around the site. Now, I think he and Kevin, with whom he works, had a bet that in the first week they would get 12 subs. And I think in the first 3 days they got like 50. Now we're up to or they got 40. Now we're up to 50 or 60 or something like that. I have to go check. I know I personally manage 3 subs right now. I know you have at least one, which I use. You have videos.
You've got San Francisco. Are you open source?
Open source.
And what's
hip hop.
Oh, hip hop. Okay, I don't
by far my most active one.
Is it?
Oh yeah, I'm like addicted.
Is it like Spotify links or YouTube links?
YouTube links. That's where I start. Like I'm just basically sharing a ton of videos that I like, and then we're starting to get kind of discussions on there too. Like some dude, I don't know even who it was, asked their favorite Kanye album last night. Right. I'm not a big Kanye guy, so I kind of said, I like his beats, and the first one because of the features. I like it because Mos Def's on there. But it's cool. Like, more people are starting to have these discussions, and I'm just posting tons of videos I like, and it's freaking awesome. Mm-hmm. And, I use that one. Culture is fantastic. All kinds of weird stuff on there. History is really fascinating. Your video one is fascinating. Podcast is a great one. Yeah. I saw your recommendation for this new AI one that I liked a lot.
Did you listen to it?
70% through there, 60% through. It's quite good.
Yeah.
We should talk about that too. But anyways, the point is all the things I love about Reddit slowly are coming over here. But now the people that actually work the soil are getting paid, which is great. There's value rank and trust signal, which means I can better figure out what's good information and what's not.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I just love it, man. I've been a Reddit fan all my life, it seems like. And, been very sad to see the way Reddit has gone. And I think StackerNews has a chance to take the beauty of Reddit, reopen it, remonetize it, and potentially create a new information discovery engine on top of it. So I'm incredibly bullish on all that. Additionally, I think that, I made a tweet the other day, and I actually really believe this. I think this has the potential to be way bigger than anyone realizes. Mm-hmm. The search engine stuff is really big on top of it. Like, even if it's just Reddit, I mean, Reddit, whatever, I forgot their last private valuation was a $10 billion company or something. If you've marked down halfway, multi-billion dollar company, they haven't really monetized it very well. Ads are not the right thing there, in my opinion. Yeah. StackerNews already has some interesting stuff. One, subs alone, people are paying a lot of money for subs already. That's interesting. They have the jobs board. There are the promoted, tweets. There's posts. There's a lot of different ways that could go. But where I think things get crazy, so you've got that as phase one, then you've got the search and discovery. There's probably some really interesting business models around that. Where I think things start to get crazy is, I have historically loved a lot of the ideas that Balaji puts out. Mm-hmm. I wish he wasn't so shitcoiny, but c'est la vie. Like with a lot of guys like him, I just take the good ideas, scrap out all the unnecessary token crap, and just be like, okay, the network state, a fantastic idea. You don't need a token, like all that silly, but what if this is what he's getting at? I'm starting to form communities with new people that I don't know online around shared and common interest. Right. And we're establishing today, it's me as a dictator of my own, but maybe in the future, there'll be more, multipolar governance schemes that are come up with where we're collectively governing this new online nation state. Yep. Or whatever you want to call it. And hey, by the way, we can now crowdfund resources. Wonder what we could do with that. Maybe buy some land somewhere. Right. And I can just...
And we already have territories.
Why not bring that from the digital into the physical? So if you squint, you can kind of start to see wait a second, maybe this is the new form of opt-in governance and collective resource gathering where we can build our own governments and communities. Yep. Seems really promising.
I think it's a really attractive idea because, anytime institutions have been around for a long time, they also get captured and sort of ossified by the players. And you've seen this. You've followed any of the Harvard stuff that.
Honestly, at this point, all the
you look at
crap.
these things that are like, these things have been around for hundreds of years, and they're like kind of rotten inside.
The way.
It's hard to think of any that are not.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I don't know. Maybe that's. I generally am like, hey, like let's build better new things. I don't think you can adapt the old systems well, but I think the concepts of network states or of territories, and can you assemble people digitally and then take that into kind of collective action to the physical world, I think it's a great path. So I think Balaji's insight on do it first digitally and then use that to go into the physical is I think it's the right path.
Yeah.
And every new generation wants to have their own thing. They want to have their own place or space, or they want to like build their own thing. And we kind of settle with cities the way they are because there's a lot of momentum and network effects.
And what else are you going to do?
Yeah. But I mean, there's a lot of land. I mean, even just the U.S., which is only a small part of the world, has tons and tons of land available. So if people can assemble and build those, build the collective action online, you can actually find land to build, to build whatever kind of community you want.
I mean, I've often thought, I lived in Mexico for a long time. I mean, you were just talking about the U.S. Yes, there's a lot of land there, but a lot of my best friends, by the way, who are between both countries,
Yep.
I have way more in common with my best friends in Mexico than I do with like 99% of people in America. Even.
Right. Yep.
Wouldn't it be super cool if we could all just say, hey, you know what? Like, we found some incredible land in Veracruz, which is real. My buddies actually already bought some this summer.
Nice.
They actually had to go through this whole process. It's like a complicated thing where they had to buy it from, it's like collectively owned land. And anyways, it's absolutely beautiful. It's cheap as dirt if you're lucky enough to have dollars or sats. It's gorgeous. We have access to fresh water.
Wow.
What if 50 of us got together, crowdfunded enough to buy the land, build the sewage system in, or like whatever we need there.
Yeah.
Build our first set of houses, build the hot tubs,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
we got to have hot tubs. And, oh, by the way, it's all transparent the way the money is flowing.
Yep.
Nothing's being siphoned off corruption-wise. Like, seems pretty compelling to me. I would be I don't know if I would go all in and move there just yet, but like I would contribute to it.
Yeah.
And maybe over time I would.
And that seems to me like the future, the model, it's a weird niche, high-end type of, it's a high-end experience day, but that's how everything starts, right?
Totally.
Everything starts as, new ideas are kind of expensive and you have to be not so price sensitive at the beginning. And then you get to sort of like figure out what works, optimize it, make it available to a lot more people. Everybody can kind of use these services over time.
And by the way, it's certainly high end in that the people that have access to, StackerNews and Bitcoin for the most part, probably higher end. But like these guys bought like a lot of land with incredible fresh water and resources for like 10 grand or less.
Wow.
It's not that high end.
Yeah.
For like a couple months of rent in SF.
Right.
You could own like 10 acres in Veracruz. Like,
right.
I don't know. I think it's going to happen. And I think StackerNews is by far the best infrastructure I've seen for that.
Yeah. I agree. I think I can see a path where, and I guess I was going to comment a little bit on, I think Kian has
the Nostr stuff. Yeah.
In sort of my experience working with him, he has the right kind of skepticism about the hot new thing, the shiny new object, but also curiosity and interest and like to dabble with it. And I think he's in a sense just, like any kind of Bitcoiner principled type of person, that he's not like, oh, I'm going to take StackerNews and build my evil empire there. Somewhere like, actually, like this is going to work for now, but like if we can incorporate more Bitcoin ethos, more Nostr ethos in this, like that's where he wanted to go. He'd love it to be open source and decentralized. He just has said to me he doesn't know exactly how to do that yet.
Yeah.
And I think it's smart to not rush towards it. If like to make StackerNews work, you have to have some sort of algorithm that decays the things. You can't run it without an algorithm.
Right.
And a lot of Nostr stuff is very like anti-algorithm, right?
Totally.
Not entirely, but that's kind of the...
But to be clear, my understanding is everyone has a slightly different view of the network already on StackerNews.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, I don't know if that is implemented as such, but like there's at least one algorithm and maybe one algorithm per person.
Yeah, I think it's
but
one
there's
per
not
person.
zero algorithms.
Yeah, of course.
Which is kind of, at least historically, the Nostr ideal has been zero algorithms.
But
we don't want to touch that.
is
right?
that true? I mean, there are some people, right, that are very loud and outspoken about that. But most people, I think, that are pretty reasonable recognize there's nothing wrong with algorithms. We just want transparency around what the algorithm is. And so I think that Keon also is a very actions speak louder than words kind of guy. So he's not out there politicking for any of this stuff, which, you know, actually maybe would be good if he were. But regardless, I mean, I think most of the Nostr community, you're always gonna have some people that whatever, like just want to be ornery to be ornery, but like will be excited with, like open, transparent marketplace for algorithms, which is I think where Keon wants to go.
Yeah. And even though today it's closed, I think it's fine if you have a good actor running the show there, which I think we have in Keon. So.
I agree. And I mean, obviously you never know. I mean, like, could he become Gollum? Lord of the Rings? Like, I think Keon's definitely one of the best people I've met. And like, but yeah, I mean, trust, don't verify, watch and see what happens. But he has given, over the years I've known him, nothing but just over and over the clear intent he wants to build something that he can't run. Yeah. Maybe one day he'll disappear. Like Satoshi, I don't know.
Disappear into Veracruz.
Disappear, exactly. He'd probably love it there. Who wouldn't?
Yeah. Awesome. So StackerNews, and we were talking, I thought we had a few other tangents.
Let's jump into Artur. Because we talked about that. So I have not played. So Artur, as a reminder for those who are listening and haven't played this stuff in a while, he had Nostr.band, which was a search engine. He had this kind of trust rating as a service API. Then he went all in on building Spring, which maybe you can describe a bit.
Yeah, so Spring is, I think today it's only an Android app, but it's with a goal to get to PWAs and iOS. But it's kind of I'd call it like a meta browser of Nostr apps. So it's a way to, you think about most Nostr apps, there's like where are my keys managed and how do I launch new apps and how do I safely give my keys from wherever I'm storing them to an app. It's a very hard problem. And so I think the Spring browser, the way everything I've learned about it, it appears to be like you can fire it up on Android, which I think we don't have. So we haven't actually been able to play with it.
Neither of us have used it yet.
But you fire up Spring and you probably paste your NSEC in there. And then you've got like a beautiful dashboard of a bunch of different apps you can use. And you can pop from one app to the next. So it almost feels like a home screen for Nostr. It's kind of how I think about it, at least the visuals I've seen. You can pop into Primal or Coracle or whatever you'd like to use. And I think that is a critical piece of infrastructure to enable more kind of browsing and assembly. And then he's been talking about kind of the micro apps idea and can you help kind of the fragments of apps come together. So right now, everybody kind of rebuilds a lot of the same infrastructure when they want to build an app because everybody's kind of trying to build a full app experience. But I think the vision, if I understand it right, is that you could take, little fragments of an app and attach them and assemble them. So you could take some fragments of apps and assemble them into a new experience that's not like an app as we think about it today, but it's like an experience of a bunch of different fragments that get assembled and used in this way. So he's kind of like Spring is that platform to help with that kind of key management and then sort of app discovery and use.
And that also ties in the idea you were talking about earlier with all the remixing of software, right? Or in the future, maybe there's like a marketplace for micro apps. Yeah. Maybe that becomes something. Maybe this is what something like Spring becomes.
Right. Yeah, for sure. I think an important part about that whole can you conjure up apps? That idea. An important part is if you enable an end user to conjure up an app, and they're not going to have a developer account on an app store, and they're not going to understand why they have to mess with these developer keys, and they're not going to understand these crazy review processes and like all of that stuff. They're just be like, I don't know, I just told you I want a crossword puzzle. Let me use the crossword puzzle. Yeah. And I think in a sense, it's like a different approach to the super app idea. Totally. And it may be that it's a super app as a single app, or maybe it's hopefully a protocol that helps a bunch of different things thrive in a disconnected or loosely connected federated way. But if I want that crossword puzzle, my ideal experience is I just like conjure it up and have it, and then I have like a link and I can save it to my home screen as a PWA, and then I can share a link to that with you. It didn't have to get developer keys. I didn't need a developer account. I don't need to go through a review process. I just share something I have from the web. Yeah. If that future is the case, then why can't those things just be browsable through Spring or some other kind of, some other kinds of like app-like interface, but not like the App Store style of an app.
I agree. Like an open browser, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like browsers in theory are on the web.
Yeah.
I obviously can't say too much either because I haven't used it. The two things I will say, two things on Archer's app, the browser. One is I was really excited to see on StackerNews, people seem organically, like multiple people are talking about how much they loved it. So that's great. Can't wait till I can try it. So it seems like he's going in at least a direction that some people like. Two, I like that he's thinking a lot about this trust strength thing as well. And, both he and Kian are both obviously, very first principle, deep thinkers that have been doing a lot of research on Web of Trust. And, there's like a lot of like academic papers, which frankly are above my pay grade at the moment. And it seems like Archer's experimenting stuff where people can kind of like adjust their own weights. And, I think maybe there's like some auto weighting and maybe you can like dial up someone that you think you should have as more of a trusted node in the network, dial down and, kind of let your own trust view of the network evolve that way.
Right.
But so I think that's the thing I'm probably, besides the fact that he's building a browser, most excited about is that he and Kian are both figuring out how do you create an infinite number of views or an infinite numbers of trust windows into an open and decentralized network. I think that's like a fascinating intellectual question.
Right. And you said there's like these papers. Is it kind of a researchy type thing?
Like university, theses.
Because I think the biggest limiter in my mind is, do we have product experiences that generate enough interesting personalization? So do you think on StackerNews or just on like open Nostr events, do you think we generally have enough that we can start playing with these levers, or is it kind of just let's get more momentum with the data first, or where are we sort of in the evolution there?
It's a good question. I know there was maybe 6 weeks or so ago, Jack posted something where he was like, search is the big thing we're missing on Nostr. And then you and Archer had a really interesting conversation where both of you kind of came to the opinion that yes, in the long run, but we don't have enough content yet for search to matter or discovery to matter. So probably true. We just need to get more apps, more content before this stuff matters a ton. But at least in StackerNews, I think we're there. I mean, there's a lot of content coming there every day now.
Yep.
And at least in the Bitcoin sub, it's pretty damn full. So and we have, tens of thousands of daily active users, from what I can tell in the stats, at least. And so it seems like anecdotally, it just feels to me like we're at that point. I mean, obviously more users, probably better data. But yeah, I feel like we're at a good spot, at least in StackerNews for that.
On StackerNews, but StackerNews is centralized, so it's hard for other people to experiment. So is this like a priority right now for Kian, or?
I don't think so. I mean, I can't speak for Kian, but my sense is that will probably open it up over time, that he's just like got a lot of stuff he's dealing with right now. Yeah. In terms of Artur and his trust rank, I mean, I think for one thing, obviously, I think they got 500 or so people that are using it right now, or something like that. Once he opens it up to iOS, I think a lot more people will flood in. Yep. So hopefully that comes in the next month or two. So we probably have another order of magnitude or two to go before that becomes like the limiting factor. It's probably just like usage right now.
Right. Cool. And what else on Spring? Other things we should be thinking about where it touches?
No, I mean, I'm just really interested in what this long tail of apps is going to look like. I mean, he mentioned a few of them. I can't wait to see. Like, I was just very pleasantly surprised to see that, even though I think, Nostr is maybe stalled in some of the like external user metrics, like developers continue to ship new stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what we need, because we don't know what the next big thing that's going to pop is.
Right. It's cool.
Yeah, I'm excited.
What else? Do we have other topics?
There are a couple things I wanted to mention. One, I think we should maybe save it for a longer conversation next time. I'm becoming increasingly obsessed in this like kind of like idea around maybe next paper is forming in my mind. I'm really interested in this idea of like evolving computers instead of designing them. So this is something that...
What's that all about?
We should have a much longer conversation. Basically, my thesis is Bitcoin is energy-backed money, and basically like the next introduction of AIs plus humans, like why I'm calling my fund Hive Mind. This is also top of mind for me for a couple of reasons. One, I was re-listening to a podcast with Drew Bansel. He always has great ideas around this stuff. I think we kind of see eye to eye on where this is going evolutionary wise. Two, I'm redesigning my website. Hopefully that gets out by next year, in the next 2 weeks. And so I'm thinking a lot about how I'm trying to describe, like, I don't see my fund as a Bitcoin fund. It's more of how do we build this super organism? That's what I'm interested in. And I think that computers in general are very brittle because they're designed by human minds. The most resilient and like the types of structures that are good for evolution. I think this is the Galt's law thing or whatever, where it's like you need a small thing that becomes part of a bigger thing, where you can let's call this hole-on theory from Ken Wilber. Every hole is part of a new hole all the way up and all the way down. It comes from evolution, not design. And I think that we're going to have the same thing with computers and with AIs. Then in the future, the best AIs and the best computers are going to be those that evolve. And to evolve, that means you need basically to have metabolism, and metabolism is going to evolve. Basically, you're going to have metabolic pathways, which are represented by the ATP of these systems, which is Bitcoin, and probably the quote unquote delineation between organisms is going to be who holds the Bitcoin private key. Mm-hmm. So anyways, I have a lot more to say there, but this is like very much top of mind for me. And this is a topic I'm just becoming endlessly interested in, is how do we evolve computers instead of designing them? So more to come. One other thing that I wanted to just touch on. Oh, actually, yes. Two things I want to touch on. One, you mentioned before, PWAs. Mm-hmm. I'm excited to listen to your app store, store.app.
Store.app, yep.
Seems like PWAs are having a moment. I know Mutiny has one. Mm-hmm. Geyser has one.
Yeah.
Albi will have one very soon if they don't already out. A bunch of people are doing this. What was your big takeaway from that?
Yeah, I think so I had a discussion with Morgan Bender, who created Store.app. And Store.app is meant to be like an open app store for just the web and kind of to push PWAs to be more accessible. I think one of the big things I didn't realize they were doing, which I think is could be quite a big deal, and actually everybody building PWA should be aware of, is they're building kind of a bunch of like an NPM installer that you can just drop into kind of the rest of your website build.
Cool.
And it will have a bunch of like the infrastructure and kind of UIs to help users understand what a PWA is and how to get it installed.
I love it.
So if you think about all the different form factors and like prompts you have to do, and if you're on iOS, you may want to show like a little thing that shows you how to add to home screen, and maybe it's a little bit different on Android. And maybe it's not like that at all when you're accessing it via like a laptop. All of those decisions should be like understood and made once.
Got it.
And so they build all of that.
Cool.
They figure it out. And so if you're building a PWA, you don't have to like, hey, when I'm on Android, if I'm on this size device, then I want to have a prompt that explains to go use this feature of this menu to add the PWA. They just like out of the box have that available for you. So it's like,
that's amazing. Big
value add for developers to be able to like more easily deploy a PWA, which I think is like a big win.
And is their thesis that, damn.
Oops, is that my thumb causing that? I think it actually is. Oh. I think it does not stop it. I think it just stops the video.
Oh.
But it's still recording. So.
PWA's Store.app, is there a thesis that there's like a window of time right now where people are just getting frustrated with the app stores either censoring or making it difficult to launch new kinds of apps, and that eventually everyone goes PWA?
Yeah, I mean, he bought the domain. I think he said he was like the first .app domain ever, because he's been, I think in like 2018, 2019 when .app domains went around. I think he was one of like the very first few seconds, because he had this idea he's like wanted to pursue. And
it's a good name.
He didn't actually start pursuing it until Web Push was, I think, announced last summer and is actually now broadly available. And just being able to like give push notice to a PWA is like a big deal and a game changer. So he's kind of like been noodling on it for a long, long time. We talked about stuff that happened 15 years ago. But the fact that he registered the domain so recently, and then he actually, because of this Web Push announcement, he said, okay, now's go time. But I think he sees like this future where the app stores are, increasingly under some regulatory scrutiny. And so they need to be savvy about, kind of giving more, right? Mm-hmm. So you see like Apple could just say, we're not supporting PWAs. Instead, they're like, we support PWAs. Right. Look, here's push notice.
It gives them regulatory cover.
They show that they're just sort of adapting to what the world wants and not pushing people through their app store, is kind of, I think, how the regulatory narrative would work on their side. But I think there is like more openness being pushed throughout the ecosystem. And, so I think they say like, look, there needs to be a more open provider. Now, I think he's like very pragmatic and open-minded, but, I don't think he has all the answers to this. Like, so
Yeah.
how do you ensure you don't, create the same kinds of problems, like regulatory problems that existing app stores have if you get big? I don't think he has a specific detailed plan of how that's going to work. I think he's generally like oriented toward trying to do the right thing.
Right.
And so you kind of probably have to just play it out, get momentum, get the thing going. Maybe, and we talked a little bit about Nostr.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. If only there were an open protocol for identity and.
Right. But I think it actually echoes a little bit of the StackerNews style of like, when you build something kind of more traditional, centralized, you can do it faster. You can make the UX simpler. You can kind of get off the ground. And if your goal is, I don't need to invent the technology that enables like information to be served in multiple relays, I just need to make a great UX. Like, let's optimize on that first. And over time, maybe we can figure out, does Nostr win? Does Mastodon or some other service win? Like, you can kind of be agnostic about the layer there and don't race toward any given layer. I think that's how I'd at least characterize his view. That's sort of my observation of.
Well, yeah, I'm excited to learn more. I was excited to see a lot of Nostr and Bitcoin apps. Looks like are now listed on their app store. I know at least Mutiny is, and a couple others.
Yeah.
So that was very cool to see, and it sounds like they're at least open to learning more about Nostr and Bitcoin, which is cool.
Yeah.
It also reminds me when you talk about the NPM stuff. Albie was playing with this idea, and I would love to see this. I've been thinking about this idea since I was at my last fund for years now. Anyone that ships anything but like little packages, right? Little like software packages.
Yeah.
It makes so much sense that they should get paid some sats when that stuff gets downloaded, right? Like, I cannot wait for a day when open source is just supported by like, okay, you want my little package in here? It costs, 1 sat,
Right.
or 10 sats, which for an individual user, it's nothing. But, you get 100 million downloads, that starts to really add up.
Right. And
so
how do you, I guess the challenge is how do you create like differential pricing? Because I think most of the issue is like, sometimes when you use a package, it's basically going to go into some other free open source thing that nobody's going to make money on or nobody intends to. It's just like net good for the world, and you wouldn't want to preclude or exclude those things from being able to happen. And sometimes it's going to be an important part of a thing that gets sold to a corporation
Adobe
for
or something.
multi-million dollars, right?
It's a good question. I'll
So
have a good answer. I mean, one answer is that everything has a cost,
Yeah.
including the like good stuff for the world. Maybe it's like only one Satoshi, but kind of in like the same spam prevention way. Like I think one thing, that's really coming around my idea around this sort of evolving computers and stuff is that there's no such thing as free ever, right? Like there's like really cheap, but like, certainly with AI stuff, every time you're on a GPU, that has a real energy cost.
Too cheap to meter?
Interesting. Well,
isn't that a Kevin Kellyism?
It is. It's been a while since I've heard that one, but I don't think that, I'm not sure that applies anymore because now we can like meter everything and like, I don't know. I mean, I this is an opinion I guess I hold a little less firmly. Maybe there are certain things that should just be like free flowing. But when there's even a one Satoshi, whatever cost is to it, that does potentially pay the cost of like someone's running a server somewhere for that, or someone is, I don't know, like paying some minor electricity cost or something. I don't know. I mean, that maybe there will be a way to do it conditionally. If you want to just contribute it for free, you can. And if it's like something that's used under any kind of like money making scheme, you have to pay for it. I could be open to that too. But I do think in the future, my guess is that, I've been thinking a lot about sort of information and entropy and energy lately. And this is a whole nother like rabbit hole that's like related to my evolving computers thing.
Yeah.
We can have a much longer discussion about this. But one way I'll just kind of workshop some of these ideas.
Yeah.
One way that I think about entropy is the opposite of information. And information just means you like have an idea about how things are ordered. And entropy just means you don't have an idea about how things are ordered. And one way to get less entropy is to spend energy. And you could argue that humans are anti-entropy machines. And we take energy and convert that into getting more of an idea of how things are ordered.
Right.
And so I do think that like everything
very efficiently too, right?
Yeah, very efficiently.
Very,
right.
very low power.
Yeah, sure.
I think I heard, is it 20 watts? Your brain runs on 20 watts.
I don't know what the number is, but I know, but compared to what we're doing with LLMs, it's like a joke, right?
Yeah.
We're way more efficient. And again, we're evolved. We're not designed.
Yeah.
But anyways, but that's a bit of a tangent. That's a much longer conversation. But the takeaway is that there's nothing that's like quote unquote free. Everything has an energetic cost. It may be very tiny, but like there is some cost.
Yeah.
And I think that, over time we're going to be able to more accurately reflect those costs. And the more things, like a lot of problems in our world, I think come from not being able to accurately have real time costs associated with the action and just kind of like delaying it till a future time, not having a quote unquote real time settlement. And that leads to all kinds of opportunities for corruption and middlemen to get involved that don't need to. And so the closer we can be to the territory itself, the closer the map gets to the territory, the more accurate and the more like free flowing it is. And that's a good thing. Anyways, that's a much longer conversation, but I forgot exactly where I was going with that right now. But
you were workshopping your thesis on
energy information and something with like basically being able to more accurately reflect the cost of things. I forgot that. What was the point before that we're talking about?
Jeez.
Yeah. Anyways, it'll come back to me, but this will be a much longer conversation. But in general, I'm interested in more accurately reflecting the energetic costs of things in real time.
Right.
And I think that creates a better, like I think the closer we get to truth, the better it is. Mm-hmm. And I think that a big way to get closer to truth, and a big part of my thesis around Bitcoin has always been that there is a true energetic cost, at least in this dimension to everything. Yeah. And the more accurately we can reflect and pay it in real time, the better. And so, yeah.
Yeah. All right. I'm in.
more to come there, but that's something that's like really kind of like I'm noodling on these days.
Cool. So we somehow got from PWAs to energy and entropy and digital scarcity again.
Yeah.
All roads lead to Bitcoin.
It really does. I mean, I know like my friends, people must be super obnoxious. By the way, I'm trying like really hard with the bull run coming to like I do not want to be the fucking Bitcoin guy, but it is true. Like, it's like, you know,
how was your Thanksgiving?
Well, the good news is, yeah, like I really try and avoid that. I do not want to be that guy, but like, yeah, the people close to me, I've already explained my thesis. They either get it or they don't. But the way that I always talk about it is Bitcoin is energy backed. Like all I'm in, like forget Bitcoin. I'm just interested in kilowatt hours. I'm just interested in calories. And yeah, more to come on that. That's why like what I'm spending a lot of time thinking about. But eventually everyone will understand Bitcoin is just a ledger of calories. Mm-hmm. And that's really important because that's what the universe runs on.
Right. So it's not a voting mechanism or...
Well, it is in the sense that calories are a voting mechanism, like, I guess, in some sense, right? Like whatever the joules kind of vote to reproduce or not in a way. Right. I don't know. Yeah, that's a weaker link, but...
Well, you know, I guess as the world, as the world continues, you know, more people, I get that. You know, do you have an estimate of how many people probably get or understand Bitcoin or Nostr or Lightning or any of these, like order of magnitude? Do you have?
Yeah, I read a paper that talked that there's a couple 100 million people that have like interacted with Bitcoin in some way, shape, or form. I'm assuming most of those have come through like custodial services or exchanges. Interestingly, I have to go back and look at the numbers, but I think more outside of the US than inside the US, which is interesting and kind of makes sense. In terms of how many people do I think actually understand it, I think very few. And like, I don't think anyone fully does, right? Like, you know, very few people, for example, that I know really take this energy lens to it. And I personally think it's like the most important lens. Yeah. And there's like 2 or 3 that I think that are really taking that in the whole world. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying other people don't have like pieces of that. I consider myself to have a piece of that, but not all of it. But it's yeah, it's just like an endless rabbit hole of interesting.
Right.
Inquiry.
We don't want to have yet another Bitcoin podcast, so
we'll stop there.
We'll focus on the Nostr. Yeah. Any
what else? Anything else? Oh, one last thing I did want to talk about and just get your take on StackerNews is I don't know how you say his name, Ezekias or whatever. The guy.
I think it goes by EK.
EK?
Yeah.
Cool. That makes it a lot easier for me. He works with Kian on StackerNews and appears to be a good developer. He recently started an Oracle sub.
Oh, yeah.
And as part of the Oracle sub, he started a Delphi.market. Now, I am so interested in this. This is a prediction market site.
Oh, I didn't realize. So Delphi.market
this is project.
Oracle sub territory they're both EK.
Yep.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. And I've been, asking this question for years. When are prediction markets going to take off? I'm curious your thoughts on this. And you could argue, well, they kind of do around presidential elections and the price of Bitcoin and sports betting. Those are all prediction markets, fair. But you may remember, I remember when I was at my last fund, I was pretty excited about what Joey Krug and those guys were doing with Augur.
Oh, right, okay.
And obviously now I think that they just picked the wrong thing to build it on. But I think the idea is fantastic. And so I wonder, EK was making the prediction on his prediction sub that this will be the bull market when prediction subs take off, prediction markets take off. What does that mean? I don't know. We have to ask his sort of acceptance criteria for that, because you could argue that they already have for sports betting or for betting on the price of Bitcoin, the options markets.
Right.
What is your take on this? Why aren't prediction markets much bigger for everything? And do you think we'll get there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we don't really have, I think, a legal way to do this in the U.S. today.
It all comes back to regulation,
which can limit the growth of something. I think gambling is very popular, but not very legal. So
yeah,
at least in the U.S. So as long as we're living here and abiding by the laws of the land, I think it's tough to do, and a lot of development happens this way. So I think it could be done elsewhere, but then you don't have access to
all the liquidity here.
The liquidity that's available here. So I think the reason we largely don't have this is we don't have. I mean, when you're trying to specify a future, you need to be able to get liquidity, and you need to have somebody who's going to be the decision maker on these things. And all these like schemes are all like band-aids and paper clips of who decides? Well, anybody decides. It's decentralized. Well, it's like, how do you need to actually have a credible thing, like, hey, if there's like an edge case or it gets near something, what's the mechanism for deciding? Do you randomly choose everybody who bet? Is it everybody who bet over a certain amount? Like, we just don't have systems to do these kinds of things. So they end up becoming like, if it's so big that it's a presidential debate type thing, you can probably get enough liquidity that it's like fun for that moment. But I think it's hard to get enough liquidity when you don't have any legal ways to build these things into businesses. I think prediction markets will happen. I think, in the fullness of time, everything happens. So I think they will happen, but I think, we don't really have the right primitives yet. Like Nostr could be a contributor. I think you don't really want to run a proper, a prediction market. Like, you don't want to turn StackerNews into a gambling site.
Yeah, definitely
ultimately,
not.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you do it? How do you build liquidity? And how do you have a team behind it, or some sort of open protocol that has a real order book? I don't think we have a credible way to build great order books yet, because people can really mess with order books if they're not like, if I can see all of the things that you are submitting to the order book, I can actually like change the kinds of things I'm going to submit to the order book. So
it's a really good point. I think, there's a couple
oracles, like who decides?
Well, so there's a couple of solutions. This one solution is you just like maybe some, countries become friendlier to this, like in El Salvador or Singapore or whatever. I think more likely in the medium term, I'm very bullish. So companies like Mutiny, and they're really involved with this whole discrete law contract, the DLC thing. And so that seems very early, but I know Ben Carmen seems like the world expert on that, or one of the 2 or 3 world experts there is. So this idea of basically being able to sign a Bitcoin bet, and potentially you could use Nostr for, I guess, figuring out like broadcasting what your bet is to the Oracle, and then agreeing on an Oracle, and the Oracle could broadcast over Nostr as well the result of an outcome. You still have to trust that Oracle. But in theory, you could do, as long as you trust that an Oracle or a group of Oracles puts out the right state of the world. So you could do this like Coinbase's price feed for the price of Bitcoin, or Coinbase average with Kraken and Binance and a few others. Then you can trustlessly settle that bet, as long as you trust that their information is right. With DLCs. And I think that's probably not that far off.
Yeah.
You still have to build the order book around it and liquidity.
And how you manage the trust. Like, what if maybe it's hard to modify the Coinbase reported price at any given time, but maybe you could coax your friend who works at Kraken to do it, or
totally. And that's why you have to and then there will be a marketplace for oracles, and the oracles will get priced probably differently based on how reputable they are, how hard it is to change the price. Like I imagine it would be pretty hard to change the Coinbase price feed on Bitcoin.
Right. Yeah. I imagine that's the case. But then if you can only bet on Bitcoin, then...
Well, exactly. Then you have to find enough trusted sources and enough liquidity for these niche markets. So maybe it cascades out. Maybe obviously gambling or sports betting. But
how do you pool the money before you distribute it?
Great question. Well, maybe you could use, I don't know, somehow the Nostr Wallet Connect stuff that Bob is working on.
Right, but you don't want it to be pooled and held by any custodian.
Well, that's what I'm saying. You could do it in a way where you trustlessly sign it over to go to, like, to pay out to one of 2 addresses depending on an outcome, as an example.
Okay. but whoever flips the outcome and says it went this way or that way.
Exactly. You have to trust that. I mean, you're always
you're
going to have to
trusting
trust a
it.
data
Okay.
feed.
Yeah.
But you might be able to mitigate that by saying, we can average data feeds or things like that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way to get rid of the trusting a data feed.
Right. I mean, because it's like a real world event that you're betting on, right?
Exactly. So you have to somehow enter in if the event happened or not.
So,
anyways, this is beyond my deep understanding. I just think it's very interesting, and I think that the information that prediction markets could give us about the world could be very useful.
Yeah, totally. So maybe we should go back to like a dorm room somewhere and just like have Bob Marley playing, and we can sort of come up with these amazing ideas. And then forget about them next morning.
Forget about them the next morning. Before we do, we'll record a video to send to Artur and Kian because they can actually build stuff. Or Pablo, because everyone knows that guy has a lot of free time. Nothing going on.
Nothing going on. Right?
So,
all right. Shall we wrap?
This was a good one, man.
This was fun.
Good holiday. Good holiday wrap.
Yeah. It's good. Okay.
All right. Man. Dan, thanks for having us.